are in your shared files in the chat, and also they're available on my website, selfcare101.net, if you want to look at those as well. So I wanted to go ahead and get that out there for you. So go ahead and let me know where you are from and if you've been here before. I always like to check in. There's people from all over the world that come in here: Utah, Alabama, Canada, Chicago, from Russia, new to this group and are okay. Awesome. So I run this group in our called Self Care 101, and I run a couple of different talk about a couple of different topics, but all related to basics of self care. And I've been doing this for quite a while. So there are people who've been here and who come regularly to this session, and there's also always people who are here for the first time. So I welcome everyone. And so, basically it's an experience that you should be able to get something out of if you've been here a while, but also if you're brand new, no worries. That's something that will cover all the basics anyway, too. Couple of things before we get started. If you have any audio or visual issues, usually refreshing your browser helps. I like to tell you that. And if let's see, yeah, let me type that in the chat too. Oh, it says it's muted when you start. Click the screen to unmute. Okay, thank you guys. Awesome. Yeah, so if you have any issues, that's exactly what you do. Again, I didn't realize that, so you might have to unmute the screen when you start. And we will be going through a series of slides. We're talking about self-shame today. And we'll be done within the hour, whatever hour that is for you, because there's people here from all over the world. So yeah, we're going to go through a presentation. I'm going to go through some slides. The chat in my group is usually really super active, and I really enjoy that and appreciate that. There's no moderator or anything like that, so let's just make sure it's always keeping everything in the realm of self-care. And if anything comes up that is something that you need to process further, or that you want more information on, whether it's conversations in the chat or whether it's something that we talk about in the presentation. The great thing is that you guys are all connected to therapists or are in the process of getting connected to therapists. So I really like to say that because I appreciate it when people come to that I counsel, come to me and say, hey, I talked about this in a group I went to or heard about this. So, just use that, for you. I know that some of you might be in that process of getting connected, but, that's really a good part of this community that we have access to that. And yes, again, my stuff, all of my slides are available, selfcare101.net. You just do have to sign up just to get access to the slides, but they're all free and all of those kinds of things. It's just a place that I house my stuff. So if you want access to all the other slides as well, and they're also attached to this chat in the download section as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. And again, we're talking about taking the self-shame out of self-care, one of my favorites. So hello and welcome. My name is Amanda. I'm a therapist in North Carolina. So I think I saw somebody in here from North Carolina as well. I specialize in helping people manage anxiety and build healthy self-care practices. So that is something that I'm passionate about. I do a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a very, very common type of therapy, modality of therapy used to treat lots of different things, especially anxiety. And the idea behind that is thoughts, feelings, and actions. So your thoughts affect your feelings affect your actions. So my goal in all of this is to help us to recognize our thoughts, think about the actual language and word choices that we're using in our brain, and then kind of move those around a little bit to be a little bit more realistic and open, so that we can start to feel a little bit better and maybe be a little bit more motivated. That's the gist of that. So thoughts, feelings, and actions. And then I also am trained in what's called solution-focused therapy. I like to always give a shout out to that because that was a big part of my educational experience. And the idea behind that is, when you go into therapy, there's lots of different ways that you can navigate what you're dealing with, right? And sometimes we need to process why something happened, or we need to go back and kind of tie up some loose ends or look at the past, right? There's different reasons for that. But sometimes we also want to look forward and say, hey, okay, got this going on. What's the solution, right? Finding those solutions. So for the purposes of this groupinar, it's great to kind of look forward and think, hey, how can I move forward? What's a solution that'll get me some tangible things I can do to help me feel better about myself and that I'm taking care of myself. The idea behind that, though, is that you are the expert in yourself and your healing. So you are the expert. So I might have some ideas. People in the chat might have some ideas. You might find things on the internet that says, hey, do this, try that. Those are all ideas that may or may not fit with you. Okay. So I don't ever want to tell somebody to do something that is not going to be a good fit for them, because at the end of the day, that's not going to be helpful. It's just going to end up making them feel bad about themselves and not do it. So what I want you to do is start to look at different things and decide, is this a fit for me and what works for me? There's a huge individual component to that. You guys know yourself better than anybody else. So lean on yourselves for that. So what we're going to talk about in this particular groupinar, or it's called taking the self-shame out of self-care. Really, this is very, very foundational to all aspects of self-care, because a lot of times for some reason we end up trying to do things out of self-care, but they end up making us feel worse about ourselves because we either don't do them, or we feel guilty, or we feel selfish, and all of that. So this is a common thing that happens, and we want to kind of go ahead and get that out, talk about it, get it out in the open before you start building practices and starting to go down that cycle of self-shame. So that's why I like to go ahead and kind of talk about this now. It's a real thing. Most of us do it at some point in times in our lives. I do it all the time. It's common. So we can talk about it and come up with ways to kind of armor ourselves against that. So we're going to look at what exactly is self-shame, how do we self-shame our self-care, okay, and then how we can work to squash that. Okay. Now, I don't expect anybody to come out of this, hour-long webinar and be perfect and, never shame themselves again. That's not, if that happens, like, wow, okay, oh my gosh, that's awesome. It's not going to be a quick fix, but it is a certain way we look at thinking, and we can start to change our narrative. We can start to change the way we think and start to change the way we treat ourselves. And it will really, really help. It'll have a huge lasting impact. So that's what we're going for, is looking at different things like that and trying to find some ways to just, integrate little things to help us feel better and be nicer to ourselves, really, and be more positive. So the first thing that I like to do when I do my groupinars is I like to ask you guys to name 3 things that bring you joy right now. Okay. So in light of self-shame, if this is hard for you, that's okay. This can be a tough question. It can be an easy question, but it's an important question. So try to look around and find 3 things that bring you joy. And if you can't think of any, just read the chat, and you'll find something in the chat. Or just notice that about yourself, right? Music, foster kittens, books, yoga in my blanket, cats, cleaning, painting, cats, bunnies, warm tea, dance, food, and my dogs, spending time with my friends and family, making myself food, my job, watching YouTube, cross-stitching, reading, being outside, sunshine, audiobooks, bananas that are just right. Yeah, because a banana that's not just doesn't really bring me joy. Photography, sunshine, my freedom and safety, the sun shining, these groups, reading, binging TV shows. Awesome. Starting to go ahead and come from an abundance mindset, right? Instead of coming in here and thinking about all the things that we got going on that aren't working, we're starting to move into, yes, this doesn't dissolve those things. There are still things in everybody's life that is not necessarily joyful, right? But they're reminding ourselves that in the midst of all of our chaos, in the midst of all of our strife, there are still things that bring us joy, right? There's still sunshine and plants and cereal in the world, right? So yeah, there's trauma and chaos and conflict and all of that, but we still got Captain Crunch hanging in there, right? It doesn't make up for it, but it's important for us to take all things into consideration so we have a balanced viewpoint. That's what it's all about. Family dance, music, pets, walks, and kids. One thing that brings me joy is the shirt. Let's see if you guys can see it. It says, "This is my therapy shirt." It's actually something that's BetterHelp is doing. I don't know, when they're doing all that kind of, when they're doing everything or how they're doing it. But yeah, it's a BetterHelp shirt that says, "This is my therapy shirt." So that's what I wore today because that's my therapy shirt. It's the shirt I do therapy in. It's amazing. It's my favorite thing. It's my new wardrobe. So yes, that's my favorite. That's the thing that brings me joy today. All right. So I will move on. So if you guys want to keep talking and keep communicating in the chat, you guys can. And I'm going to go through the presentation, and I'll come back to the chat in a second. So feel free to lean on each other. Again, this is being recorded, and you will get a recording of this. So chat's super, super anonymous because it doesn't even have names or anything. But just be mindful of of what you want to put in there and communicate. It's never usually a problem, but because this is recorded, but it's meant to also keep it really private and anonymous too. So just want to throw that out there too. But lean on each other in the chat. It's a great experience. Continue to talk about what brings you joy, follow along with the presentation, or just listen to this like a podcast or watch me. No pressure to talk in the chat. It's whatever is going to work best for you. Okay. So we're going to review a little bit. I do this every session, just reviewing a little bit about the concept of self-care, right? The basics. So we really went into this last week. And if you were here, it's a review and it's important because it needs to be reviewed all the time. If you weren't here, then this is a little bit about what we talked about. So when you break it down, the word self-care simply means taking care of yourself. So the biggest concept I want you guys to take out of this is that self-care, self-care, taking care of yourself, right? Taking care of yourself, self-care. It's something we do every day. So that is important because, a lot of times we think self-care has to be this big, huge, expensive, crazy, time-consuming thing, and it can be. But also the little things, right? The cups of coffee, the petting your animals, the binge watching TV, all the things that brought you joy. Those things also are self-care. So reminding ourselves that sure, we might have things that we want to work on or things that we want to add in, but we take care of ourselves every day just by existing. And that's really, really important for us to remember. It's not one specific thing or activity. It's just simply taking care of yourself. Okay. And then we all have strengths. Remember, I was talking about strength-based, solution focus. So what we want to do is we want to look at what do we already do well, right? We want to try to capitalize on those things that we already do to take care of ourselves. If we take care of ourselves every day, how do we do that, right? We all have things that we do well. We want to build upon those things that work for you, right? Like, why try to reinvent the wheel if you can kind of just look back and say, hey, this worked for me in the past. Something like this might work for me in the future, right? Or in the current situation. Reflect and rely on past experiences. Focus on what works best for you, right? It's about you and not anybody else. It's about you, okay? And then remember that self-care is not about pressuring ourselves to be somebody else. We will never be somebody else. I'm going to pause and look. I'm not exactly sure. I'll find out and let you guys know in the future. I don't know the details about that, but I do know that they will be probably available. So if anybody knows the answer to that, they can answer that. If not, I'll find out and let you guys know. Excuse me. It is being real with yourself, and it is being able to make those realistic and enjoyable goals. So being real with yourself is important, right? So don't try to, especially in the context of self-shame, not trying to overdo it, not trying to start out too big, right? It's not about lowering the bar. It's about meeting yourself where you are. So you don't want to start out with a self-care goal that doesn't work with your life, because you will end up self-sabotaging from the beginning. Okay. So that's really important for you guys to know. And really important for us to use when we're looking in this. The idea is really working smarter, not harder, right? We don't have to reinvent the wheel, spend a bunch of money, come up with all of this stuff. It's mentally exhausting and taxing to do. Sometimes it's great to do new things and awesome. So I don't want to discount that, but it's important for us to also realize that we don't always have to create things or do stuff new or, put lots of energy into stuff. Sometimes we can just use some of the stuff that's around us. So that's really, really important. So what are your self-care strengths, right? What are the things that you do well, right? How do you take care of yourself? Like, what are some things that you guys do? I know there are things that you don't do that you'd love to shout out, but what are things that you do, right? How do you take good care of yourself? How are you good at that? Hiking. It's okay if you don't know your strengths. That's why we're here. Again, every question I ask might seem simple and it might be hard. That's the point of it. If you don't know, that's okay. The idea is to start recognizing that, hey, wait, let me think about that. Maybe there are some ways. Like maybe I'm really good at drinking water. Maybe I'm really good at going to bed on time, doing long walks, right? Connect an excellent cup of coffee, connecting with friends, realizing that I need help, right? Drinking water, bedtime routine, and drinking water. Every single person in here is in a grouping about self care. So good job for doing that. So, yeah. Taking medication, knowing what self care is, planning, meditating, this class, yes, skincare, giving myself grace lately. All of you guys signed up for therapy, which is a immense act of self care that more and more people are doing, which is great. But not everybody does that. So you're taking care of yourself by tending to your needs, just by being here, being present, and being a part of this, right? So good job. That's a strength for you. Okay, that's a strength for you. Trust as a therapist, that's a strength. Really, I mean, that's one of the biggest achievements in therapy is starting therapy. And that's just the truth. So good job. Good job. Right. Awesome. And I'm proud of all of you for doing that. And that to me tells me that when things get difficult, you get help. That's what that tells me. That doesn't just tell me you sign up for therapy. That tells me that you take yourself seriously, you value yourself, you value your mental health, and when stuff gets difficult, you step in, not out. That's what that tells me. So there you go. Every single person in here. Congratulations on that. And good job with skincare and all the other things that we're talking about doing too. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Saying no when I need to take care of myself. Good job. All right. So we're going to talk about self-shame. So what is self-shame? So now we're getting a little focused on the meat of the presentation. So self-shame is when you shame yourself, self-shame, shaming myself, right? So when you shame yourself, it's because we are doing things like focusing on all of the shoulds of life, right? The shoulds that are things that, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. We are supposed to do this, we're supposed to do that, right? Self-shame is when we believe all of our negative self-talk, right? When we say really mean things to ourselves and then take it as truth. That is sometimes really, really damaging to our inner narrative and to our self-esteem. We all do it at different times in different ways. Sometimes I'm really great to myself. So I'm going to give myself credit for that too. But I'm not immune. Therapists are not immune to being really mean to ourselves. It happens, right? It happens. So when we do that, recognizing that and working through that helps. But a lot of times we believe that, and then it becomes a bunch of ick. When thinking is all or none, right? So I have to do this, or I'm not going to do anything, right? Yes, sounds like cognitive distortions playing out in self-care. Yes, exactly. You see the CBT in there? Thank you for there's a lot of stuff integrated in this that I'm just trying to make sense, but this is all based on CBT, cognitive distortions, the way we think about things, right? So that's why I'm a CBT therapist. So focusing on the shoulds, when your thinking is all or none, catastrophizing our mistakes, right? So when we make a mistake and we overthink it, we make it worse than it is. We think it's the end of the world, right? We give ourselves way too much responsibility for stuff like that. Don't give ourselves enough grace. Striving for ultimate perfection, okay? And judging ourselves by someone else's standards, right? Those are all ways that we might shame ourselves. And in the end, we end up shoulding on ourselves, which is supposed to sound like another word. I did not coin that phrase, but I've heard it and I love it. We end up shoulding on ourselves when we're trying to do everything we're supposed to do, everything we should do, because at the end of the day, that's a spiral. right? It's a dark, dark rabbit hole to go down, right? Because you should do this, but you also should do this, but you also should do that. Like, is there really like a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow? Like, right? Can you ever get to can you ever do exactly what you should be doing? Because like, if you're doing that, you're probably not doing something else that you should be doing too. Right? So it's a never ending cycle. Never ending cycle. So, how have you self shamed yourself in the past? Right? So, let's talk about that. Let's talk about some ways. I do all of those things. That's why I think I'm a CBT therapist, because I have a lot of cognitive distortions and I learned a lot about it. And I'm like, that's true. And that helps. Yes, I'm all or none. I catastrophize everything. I'm a perfectionist, which helps me in a lot of ways and also hurts me in a lot of ways. So right. Yeah, perfectionists. Nothing wrong with with the root of perfectionism, right? Wanting to do things great and good is awesome. Having to do things perfect is really, really, really like not good, and it's not healthy, it's not feasible, and it ends up self-sabotaging. Feeling guilty for saying no, believing I'm an inconvenience to those around me, definitely do it to the detriment of myself. Right, it's one of those like it's kind of one of those things. It's like a you have to, as a skill, you kind of have to hone and be careful with, because too much of it can wreck you. But enough, like, there's nothing wrong with striving for the best or wanting the best. There's nothing wrong with that. Asking what I should have done different, believing I'm not enough. Yes, getting upset for myself, invalidating my experiences because it could have been worse. Absolutely. Yeah. So all of these things, everyone needs to come before my own and feel shame if I focus on me first. Self shaming myself is becoming a habit. So, I want to go through these things, not to harp on them, not to stay in this mood, but also to show, hey, we just talked about a lot of things that we all do really well, and now we're talking about some of the things that we might struggle with. Right? We're humans. I'm a human, you're a human. I'm really good at taking care of myself, and I'm really good at self-shaming myself. Okay? So just know that that's like a thing that we all do, and we all struggle with it in different ways based on lots of different things, our experiences, all those kinds of things, right? So how can we move a little bit past that, right? We're not going to be perfectionists. We're not going to be all or none. So we're not going to change the world in one group, and we're not going to be the most positive, amazing, like perfect people. That's not the goal. But we're going to kind of move into how can we rethink some of these things, and how can we sort of move into a better spirit of self-care. Okay. So if you take all of those things, right, those are all those cognitive distortions, as someone said, and you look at all of those different things, then how does that affect our self-care? So how it affects our self-care is that these two things do not mix, because in the same statement that we tell ourselves we should be doing more self-care, we also tell ourselves that self-care is selfish. How do we think those two thoughts at the same time? They're not the same. How do we do that? Right? I need to practice more self-care, but geez, Amanda, self-care, that's really selfish. I'm not doing enough, or I'm doing too much. There is no element of there's no room for anything but self-shame in that. Because if I take care of myself, oh, Amanda, you're selfish. If I don't take care of myself, oh, Amanda, you're putting people above you, and you need to put your face mask on before other people in the plane. Like, something's wrong with you because you're not taking care of yourself. Oh, you're taking care of yourself? Oh, you're being selfish. What's the answer? What's the answer to that? Where is there an answer to that other than, okay, that's a no, right? Like, I mean, like, okay, what do I do with that? Right? That's why we've got to work on this, because it doesn't make sense. We shame ourselves for not taking time for self-care, and yet we feel guilty when we do take the time for self-care. So all of us say, I need to put myself on my schedule. And then you put yourself on your schedule and you're like, but what about my kids and my family? Right? And then we assume we're going to fail. Right? We just assume we're going to fail. And a lot of this comes back to, all of this comes back to, we always feel like we should be doing something else. That's the should cycle, right? I should be doing this, but then I'm not doing this. And then if I do that, I'm not doing this. And then I should be doing this, and I should be doing this, right? So that's the cycle, and that's the self-shame cycle. And then we can't win. We cannot win, right? We can't win. So there we go. And then what we're doing is what we're doing. So to focus on what we should be doing, otherwise, like, okay, we're not doing that. So what is the help? Yeah. So how have you sabotaged your self-care? I saw somebody said that this is a very typical thing with families and parents, moms, the feeling of like, I'm not doing enough to take care of myself, but if I do something, I'm not taking care of my family. That's very common. How have you sabotaged your self-care? What are the shoulds that you're battling? Said no to myself, but then I say yes, so I don't look after myself. Not journaling because I'm lazy. Okay. A lot of things I want to do for self-care cost money, and I feel like I can't warrant spending on myself. Yes, I should take care of myself, not focusing on myself, change my schedule for someone else's needs. I feel like I haven't done it successfully before, and I just feel like it won't be successful at it again. Okay. I have to, continuing to push myself, fear of getting back into it, taking a day off, and then I spend a chunk of time worrying what I should say or not. I should know what self-care for me is, but I don't. Okay. All right. My anxiety is taking up my brain when I'm trying to focus on my self-care. Right. Okay. All right. So going on dates when I should be working on self-care. So, some of these things you actually probably were practicing self-care without really noticing about it. You just super judged yourself for it, right? So there's something to that. That you're when you're doing things to take care of yourself, you're practicing self-care, period, right? So how to squash the self-shame, all right? What we want to do to squash this self-shame, right? What we want to do to kind of like reframe this is we want to make sure that we're making realistic self-care goals. Self-care does not have to take time, energy, money, anything. It can, and that might be a goal that you have for the future, but it does not cost anything to take care of yourself on a very basic level. It does not take any time to take care of yourself on a very basic level, right? So reframing it and realizing that it doesn't have to be all or none. Self-care doesn't have to be an expensive massage. It doesn't have to be this big, huge thing. It does not have to be a big vacation or a trip or spending a bunch of money. It doesn't have to be any of those things. It can be, but when we're in a place where we don't have the time, money, energy, and all those things for self-care, we need to tap into what we do have access to and the ways that we take care of ourselves on a daily basis without even thinking about it. Okay, that's really, really important. We want to make our own self-care goals. Okay, why do something that doesn't work for you? Okay, I saw somebody say something about journaling, and this is a little like thing for me. It's like when you hear somebody say something helps them, journaling, coloring, whatever, that may not help you, and that's okay. So I don't know how many times I have shamed myself for not practicing self-care that I don't want to do, right? That doesn't help me. So I'm shaming myself for not doing something that wouldn't really help me anyway, right? There's nothing in any form of psychology that says everybody who needs therapy has to journal, right? No, because if that was true, then it'd be in the same chapter with what? That everybody has to go for a 5-mile run and color in coloring books and get a massage and clean their house? Like, no. Those are tools that you can use if they help you. Journaling helps you to go through some of these cognitive distortions and figure out different ways of thinking, if that is a medium for you, right? Exercising helps you to have time to decompress and put your mind on something different and process your thinking while you're moving physically. Okay. Coloring helps you literally check out by drawing circles. It's a Buddhist practice, by coloring circles and things like that, which helps you to get a break from your thoughts. They have so many different things that they do. It's what works for you. So nowhere does it say you have to journal, right? It helps me. I'm a journaler. I'm a word person. It just helps me. It's not something that other people like. So they might help, might not. It's our own self-care goals. Okay. So focusing on our feats and not our flaws, right? Focusing on those things that we do well, because we're gonna focus on our flaws. Don't worry about like trying to say think positive. People say, but I need to be realistic about the negative. If you're in a position where someone is telling you to think positive, I'm pretty sure that you're not gonna not think negative. Like I'm pretty sure that like thinking positive is not gonna like stop all of those things from going away. We can think, we know our flaws, like they're ingrained, like they're super ingrained. So talking about the things that bring me joy is not going to discount the things that don't bring me joy. They're there, right? Focus on those things that are there, that other things are there, right? The other pieces to the puzzle. Trying not to attend to those shoulds of life, right? Those shoulds, especially if there's someone else's shoulds, right? Someone else tells us how we should do something, or what works for them doesn't always work for me, right? I mean, there is a should that's like, Amanda, I should probably brush my teeth today before I go out in public. That's a helpful should, and I'll do it. Sure. But, I should do this, or I should do that, or I should do, I mean, like, some things are helpful. A should is a helpful thing. Sometimes it reminds me of things I want to do for myself, but sometimes it's not mine, right? Sometimes it's not something that's right for me. And sometimes it's not, it doesn't fit with me. Maybe a different time, maybe a different situation, but I've got to do what works best for me. Yeah. Analyze your self-care data from the past. How have you taken care of yourself? Because we take care of ourselves every day, right? Recognizing that. So when you start thinking, I don't ever practice self-care because I don't go and get a really expensive massage. How do you take care of yourself? You take care of yourself every day. We can always stand to do more, but giving ourselves credit for what we do. Okay. Giving ourselves credit for the stuff that we do and the ways that we've taken care of. You've gotten through every single situation that you've ever been through. You're here. You've gotten through every situation. Maybe you had a rocky road. Maybe it was really challenging. Maybe you didn't do it in the healthiest way, but you've gotten through everything you've gotten through. That's just the point. So, making sure that you recognize that and that that you take care of yourself in some way, even if it's you're, going around your elbow to get to your thumb, whatever. I mean, you might, it might not be the most constructive way or whatever, or people might say that I wouldn't have done it that way. I shouldn't have done it that way, but you've gotten through everything that you've been through. Right. Keeping that purpose of self-care in mind. The purpose of self-care is to take care of yourself. So when self-care becomes self-shame, it's not self-care anymore, right? When self-care becomes, oh, okay, I'm going to go to the gym every day, and then I don't, but somehow I still identify that as self-care, but I'm not going, then that element of self-care became nothing more than something that I'm going to end up needing to work on in therapy, right? Do you know how many people come into therapy because they're trying to do something good for themselves, but they can't do it, so they're shaming themselves, and so they're mad about it? And I'm like, well, but the thing that you were trying to do, you talked yourself out of, you shamed yourself into continuing to try to do something that's supposed to take care of you, but it's not, right? Reframe. That's a great cognitive behavioral word. Reframe. So rethinking or reframing things, right? As I have the opportunity to versus I should or I'm supposed to, right? This, if I do this, it's going to help me. Not if I don't do this, okay, right? You journal because someone said it's supposed to help you feel better, right? So if you don't journal, then it shouldn't do anything, right? If the idea of it is to help you feel better, then and not doing it just shouldn't do anything. But not doing it makes you feel worse, right? So recognizing that, right? The thing that we're trying to add in to help becomes something that we need to work on more. Like, and I just that just that's a spiral that I go down a lot, and I don't like to, because it doesn't work like that. It's not helpful. Being intentional with your self-care, so putting intention in it, right? So being intentional and saying, I'm going to recognize the self-care that I already practice. I am going to appreciate the days that I can't go to Starbucks and get a really expensive latte. I'm going to intentionally appreciate this cup of coffee in my hands, right? When I can't afford to go to the nail salon, I'm going to intentionally paint my nails with polish at my house. When I can't go on vacation, I'm going to intentionally enjoy sitting in a chair with a book and a cup of coffee, right? I'm going to put the intention on all of those things, because they're not, if I'm not getting my needs met in a way that's too grand or too big or too expensive or whatever, then I'm going to be very intentional in giving myself credit and recognizing the self-care that I already do. Okay? Hot chocolate at home. Yes. So I could think, ooh, I would love to have hot chocolate at a ski resort in Colorado and all this stuff, and that would be great. I can't do that. Oh, I can't enjoy hot chocolate. Not true. I can enjoy hot chocolate on my couch. Not the same, but it doesn't mean that I can't enjoy it, right? That's that all or none thinking, right? If the only way that we know that we can relax is something doesn't work with our lives and it's not realistic, then we've already set ourselves up to say, not possible, can't do that. So being a little bit more intentional and realistic with yourself can help. That doesn't mean you can't plan for big things or do kind of luxurious things or anything like that. Sure, you can do that, but that's not the only way to take care of yourself. And then remember that self-shame and self-care are two different things. They get woven together, right? If your definition of self-care becomes a bunch of stuff I can't afford and a bunch of stuff I don't have time for and that I can't do, we need to rewrite your definition, because self-care means taking care of yourself. Doesn't mean a bunch of stuff I'm not going to do and that I can't do, and it's going to make me feel like a loser, and then I'm going to end up feeling worse about myself. Right? No, that's not the definition of self-care. It can be. And from a cognitive behavioral standpoint, the things that the ways that we craft, literal words we craft and feed information into our brain, the narrative, the input of the narrative outputs a feeling and an emotion. So if our definition of self-care is all this stuff that I'm not going to do and I can't do, then how are we going to feel and act? If we change our definition to self-care is taking care of myself, how am I going to feel and how am I going to act? It's a little different. That's what's so important about shifting these things, shifting our definition, reframing our thoughts, right? Reframing that whole thing. Someone just said, I have the opportunity to versus I should. It seems small, but when you think about, if you think about like a computer, right? And you type different things in, if you're typing things into like I don't know if anybody's ever created stuff on a computer or whatever, one little letter or one little thing is going to change the whole entire system, right? So one little word in our brain totally changes the whole dynamic of what we're feeling and what we're thinking. So we have the ability to go back in and kind of, play around with that and sort of tweak it to where we feel better and we're more motivated, right? So how are you going to squash the self-care, or sorry, the self-shame, not squash the self-care. How are you going to squash the self-shame in your life? So how are you guys going to work towards that? We're going to wrap up just a teeny bit early. We'll be done in just a few minutes. Just kind of wanted to go through this, and I'm going to show you guys the rest of the series. But let's talk about this. How are you guys going to do that? What are some actions that you guys are going to take? Have a self-care draw, so when I don't have money, yes, I still have something. Yeah, hot chocolate powder. Love that. That's awesome. That's awesome. Speak kindly to myself. If I try a self-care activity, it doesn't feel right, just move on to a different one. Good for you. Because the only reason that people suggest it is because it worked for them, and so great, it might work for someone else, but like that doesn't mean, like, there's no shame in that. No shame in that. Try something else, right? Try to reframe how I talk about being intentional about self-care. Focus on the little things I can do for myself, eating well and showering. Realize most of the pressure is coming from me and not others. Sure. Cutting back on social media. Okay. Taking out the shoulds and go for small changes, right? Not feeling guilty or shaming when certain activities don't work for me, right? Understanding there are things around my house that can make me happy. Saying to myself, I deserve to look after myself, reminding myself I deserve a break as a stay at home mom, and putting my happiness first, right? Awesome. Replacing should with could. I like that. So, one thing is also the spiral is we get mad at ourselves for getting mad at ourselves, right? So if you catch yourself self shaming, do not self shame yourself, because that will be a cycle that is incredibly hard to break. Give yourself some grace, because we all do that. So if you catch yourself self shaming, the last thing you want to do is to get mad at yourself and tell yourself how horrible you are for being horrible to yourself. Because then guess what? You're being horrible for being horrible for being horrible to yourself. And then you're being horrible for being horrible for being horrible for being horrible to yourself. Right? Pause, stay with that, try to make changes. Right? Try not to self shame yourself for self shaming, because everybody does it. Me, I do it all the time. So, right. So, if you catch it, use it as an opportunity to sort of reframe, refocus, look for the little things, and be intentional. Right. Forgive myself and focus on the now. Mm-hmm. Yep. 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 And everybody who says put yourself first of all, I don't know anybody in the world who actually puts themselves 100% first. Like, right? Putting yourself first would be like, I'm going to do things regardless of the outcome for other people. So I think it gets a bad rap to say, I'm going to put myself first. Like, really put yourself in the mix. Treat yourself at least the same you would treat your kids, right? I'm not going to put myself first at the point that it puts people out, right? Like, yeah, I'm going to put on my oxygen mask, but I'm not going to be like, okay, deuces, I don't care about anybody else on this plane. Like, no. So it's not selfish to take care of yourself, because taking care of yourself doesn't mean that you're neglecting and negating everybody else around you. That wouldn't be self-care. That doesn't make any sense. So if you take care of yourself as a mom, you're not taking care of your kids, right? Yeah, teach yourself to take care of the class. The teacher, yep. Take care of yourself to take care of the class, right? Because the like me, making time for doing something for myself is not going to be a disservice to my students or to my family. And if it is, then that's not self-care, right? If there's something that I feel like I need to do for myself that's going to end up negatively impacting the other people around me, then that's not really taking care. That's not self-care, because that's not healthy, right? So it wouldn't be healthy for me to do something extreme that was going to put other people in jeopardy, because then part of taking care of myself is taking care of my family. So it's not selfish. Self-care is not selfish. It is important. Yes. All right. So how to make self-care a lifestyle. So the being mindful of how you are already taking care of yourself, looking for tiny ways to integrate that self-care, right? Ask yourself I can tell you all day long how I don't take care of myself, but how do I take care of myself? Okay, I am practicing self-care. Great, noted. My computer recognizes that I take care of myself. I will feel better knowing that. Set a self care intention every day. Create those self care moments and embrace those self care moments. We will talk more about self care moments in detail, but basically being in that moment with self care, right? Creating those situations, doing the little things like enjoying a cup of coffee, even though you can't go and maybe get a fancy cup of coffee, those little tiny things, and then embracing those times when you do take care of yourself, right? Say it out loud. So if you catch yourself doing something that is good for you, tell yourself, good job, Amanda. This is self care, right? This is self care. Good job, Amanda. This is self care. When you say it out loud, it helps you to again, fuel your narrative with those types of words and those types of things, which helps like armor you against all the negative stuff. And then find those things that bring you joy. That can help you too, because it helps get you down into the moment and get you down into focusing on the teeny tiny things. Because when we're at the lowest of our low, we have to go to the lowest of our low. We have to look for the teeny tiny things, right? And then remember that you are the expert in yourself and your healing. So you are the person who's in the driver's seat, right? There's no shoulds from anybody else. If people give you information or if they give you inspiration, you can take that in. If it helps you, great. That's awesome. Thank you, person, for giving me inspiration. But nobody can tell me what to do or make me do something. I have to make that choice for myself, and it has to be in line with what works for me. Right? Right. I'm going to list comment. I put pressure on my self care. I believe my mental health is a reflection of my self care. So when my mental health is bad, I think this is your fault. You aren't doing enough to take care of yourself. Okay. One thing I want to talk about, self care and mental health are two different things. Okay. Self care is a way that you take care of your mental health, which self care is also a way that you take care of your physical health and your social health. Like, I love that self care and mental health are connected because I'm doing a webinar about it. Self care will help you with your mental health, but they are not the same thing. You can take very good care of yourself, and your mental health can be out of whack, and you can be taking very good care of yourself in other ways. Right? So don't shoot your self care down because you're looping it in with mental health. Right? I can be emotionally exhausted and have a really, really, really horrible day mentally health wise, but yet somehow I'm still getting up, nourishing my body, going to work, doing all these kinds of things, right? So, like, they're not the same thing. They're connected. Self care is one way, self care is one medium of an intervention that you can do to take care of yourself. They're not the same thing. Okay. And remember, you take care of yourself every single day, no matter what. Take care of yourself. Your body blinks without thinking, right? Like, I mean, like, that's, we take care of ourselves on a very, 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 very basic level. It helps our mental health, but only by proxy, right? Because when we do good things for ourselves, when we take care of ourselves, and when we treat our brain right, and when we put good things in our brain, we will feel better, and then we'll be more motivated. But our mental health, no, they're not synonymous. They're not. They're very interrelated, and I don't want to discount that because I think that that's important, and that's why I do this groupinar. That's actually the whole point of this whole groupinar. But if your definition of self-care is a massage, an expensive massage, and you think that's related to mental health, then are you going to think that you're going to be in a having a mental health crisis because you can't go and get an expensive massage? Like, what? Self-care? That's not effective. That's like counterproductive. If you're going to shame yourself for not practicing self-care, then you're going to end up shaming your mental health. Nope. 2 different things, 3 different things, 4 different things. I don't even know. Self-care is taking care of yourself. That will help you feel better mentally. That's how it goes. Right? It'll help you feel better mentally. It'll help you feel better physically. It'll help you feel better socially. It'll help you feel better in whatever kind of thing. Right? But they're not the same. And I'll definitely make a note of that because that's really important. Somehow our definition of self-care gets looped up with all of this stuff. And at the end of the day, bring it down to basics. Self-care means taking care of yourself. Self-care doesn't mean having optimal mental health. Because then what, on a day where I'm like not having great mental health, I'm like not practicing self-care? Like, okay. Right? Like, no. So, yeah. They are, again, they are tied together, but it's a different type of tie. Okay. Just like journaling is not the intervention for all mental health, right? It's a medium, it's a way that you do it, it's a thing that you practice, it's a tool that you use, right? All right. Okay, so we will be able to talk about this more next week at the same time. So we are going to talk about self-care personality types next time, which if you kind of were in this and you were like, yo, I don't like journaling, and that means that I don't practice good self-care, which means that I must have like, a lot of mental health stuff going on, then come to my next one, because we can look at other ways that you could practice self-care that are not journaling, right? So we can debunk all of that. So your personality type is going to dictate the kind of stuff that you like, the kind of stuff that helps you, the kind of things that you want to focus on, that you're going to rock out. So we're going to talk about that. What works for you? Okay. Who are you in this world of self-care, and what makes the most sense for you? And then we're going to talk about emotional self-care, physical self-care, and social self-care, which we got a little bit into that this time, breaking them apart, because one of the reasons I want to expand our definition is because it has gotten so wrapped up in self-care being about mental health. Self-care is about health collectively. Mental health is one piece of that, and it will be greatly impacted. But self-care is about taking care of your whole self, mind, body, spirit, financials, everything, right? Then we're going to talk about embracing that self-care moment, like being in the moment. And then we're going to all come back together for a great big self-care resource roundup, where we talk about lots of different things that are related, where we can have some concrete tools to join. How can I join the other series? So if you go to the group on our page that you were at, got this link from, I don't know exactly when they're updated, but just check it frequently, and you should be able to sign up each week. They come up on a page once a week. They'll be listed each week. Okay, cool. So when they're listed, you can sign up, and then if you can't come to the groupinar, you will get a recording of it. So if for some reason time doesn't work for you, you can come to it. It should be every single Wednesday. If I'm not on here, sometimes that's how life happens, but generally speaking, I'm on here every Wednesday at this exact same time. And if you want to go back and get the slides from any of the presentations, you can go to my website, selfcare101.net. Again, just have to put in your email just to register, but I don't like spam anybody or anything like that. It's just like a system for that. So feel free to tap into that resource as well. So, all right, guys, we'll go forward and take good care of yourself, okay? And try not to shame yourself, okay? And if you do, don't shame yourself for that, okay? All righty, have a great week, and I'll see you guys in a week. Bye.